interview series between me and Mr. Glader and our first guest today, Mr. Eric Lechliter. Am I saying that right?
Nailed it.
Awesome. And, well, we should probably just start with that first question we have there. Just your development as a musician. Where did you start? When did you do private lessons, if you did at all? And kind of when did you decide that you wanted to do this as a career choice?
Oh, man. Well, let's see. Let's go all the way back to, I guess, sixth grade for me. I was living in this great state of Kansas at the time. And before that, the story that I always like to tell everybody is that my parents tried me at every single sport, and I was terrible at all of them. I couldn't swim. I was a terrible basketball player. When I played t-ball, I would use my catcher's mitt as a cushion for my butt in the outfield. Finally, I started I started with children's theater, and then when I found the trumpet, I was like, oh man, I'm good at something finally. So I remember a lot of hours just playing through books on my first trumpet and all that stuff, and band just seemed like the right place for me. So really pretty early on, I think I knew that I wanted to do music. So yeah, I started in Kansas when I was 10, and I moved to Missouri and did some BOA stuff, marching band and stuff out there. And all this time, I had an interest in jazz. So when I finally moved to Cincinnati when I was in high school, I'll never forget, I played a solo in jazz band on my first day of school. I was a junior, and one of my good friends now named Max Greenberg came up to me. He's like, hey, do you want to come and sit in at this jazz club called the Blue Wisp this weekend? And I thought in my mind, I was like, I finally made it. It's like from here to the Grammys, it's like just a straight shot. So yeah, Cincinnati has been really cool for me. I really didn't take real private lessons until I was in high school. I took lessons with one of my band directors in high school, and then when I moved here, I took lessons with a guy named Steve Pride, who is still, I think, the co-principal trumpet of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. So that was really cool. And from there on, I went to the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music and majored in music education with a jazz specialization. And since then, I've just been kind of hanging out in Cincinnati. So pretty straight shot for me since I first picked up the trumpet.
Sweet. Awesome.
Well, so that takes us to the next part then. What are you doing currently with your education job and playing? Just name some of the stuff that you guys are doing now.
Well, I've been lucky to have a lot of really cool opportunities in Cincinnati. So as a professional trumpet player, I play with a lot of bands around town, like the Cincy Brass, which is co-founded by Mr. Glader here, right? Namaste, which is really, really fun. Besides that, a lot of what I do now is big band related. So in addition to being a trumpet player, I'm a big band writer. So I lead two big bands in town. One is called the Original Farm League Big Band, which does all original arrangements by myself and other members of the band. And then this is actually the conclusion of my first season as artistic director for the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra, which is a nonprofit run big band that puts on two series. So I lead the big band series, and then the small group series is led by one of my professors from college named Phil DeGreg. So lots of that kind of stuff. I'm also the professor that leads the jazz orchestra at Xavier University. So that's been a lot of fun. And I teach a lot of private lessons around town and clinic with a lot of local jazz bands and stuff like that.
How does it feel teaching at Xavier, being a UC grad and everything?
Well, I'm always going to be a Kansas University basketball fan, so I don't really care about the whole rivalry thing there. But it's really been kind of cool to be at Xavier because I got the call to work there when I was, I think, 23 years old. I had just graduated from college like 2 years before. And I literally didn't apply or anything. I just got a call on the phone. It was like, hey, would you be interested in teaching at Xavier University? And I was like, yeah, I guess. But, I just like have an undergrad degree and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. So that was, going back to the big band thing, that was kind of something I didn't really think about when I was starting the Farm League band, because that was really, I had just gotten out done with my student teaching and I wanted to have a band to write for. And so I called all my good friends. I think Mr. Lechliter was busy having a newborn child and all that kind of stuff, so he couldn't be involved too much. But you know, I just kind of started that band for fun because it was what I wanted to do. But then I think that when they heard about that at Xavier, they're like, "Oh wow, this guy has the skills to kind of put bands together." So that was an instance where it all kind of came together in a cool way. So it's really cool being able to teach college.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've definitely got ideas swirling about a potential master class. We can have you out for a jazz band here at some point.
Yeah, definitely. As long as everybody washes their hands, that's cool.
Right. Well, of course.
So let's talk about like daily warm-ups. What do you do, let's say, before like a big band rehearsal or before a gig? Like if you have a limited amount of time for your warm-up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that I am definitely very routine oriented as a trumpet player, because something that I have to deal with that a lot, hopefully most people don't have to deal with, is I get cold sores pretty easily. So the way that I've dealt with that is by approaching everything from a routine standpoint. So I have a 20-minute routine that I do every single day, and I've done it every day for like the last 10 years, no matter what I'm doing throughout the rest of the day. And so I can kind of walk you through some of that stuff. So first thing that I like to do when I'm getting ready to play anything is I like to play on my lead pipe. This is something that is really important to a philosophy by this trumpet player who taught at Indiana University named Bill Adam, who I never studied with, and I didn't really study with anybody that did study with him, but I do this part of his routine. So when I'm playing on the lead pipe, you know, I just pulled my tuning slide out. I'm really thinking about just sighing kind of a firm airstream into the horn. I'm not really thinking about buzzing my lips. I'm just thinking about blowing. Okay. So when I do that, what I like to tell my students, especially if they're little kids, is it should sound like an angry swarm of killer bees, right? So I'm just thinking about sighing. Trying to get as steady as the sound as possible. I don't want it to feel like I'm doing anything up here, okay? Then from that note, make that note sound nice and full. Then I'll just try to push the air further away, still not really doing anything with my lips. If anything, it's coming from these muscles right here underneath our sternum, right? I'm thinking about those kind of flexing and putting pressure on the airstream, but staying pretty relaxed in my embouchure. So I'm going to try and just slur up until I hit the next partial. I'm And as long as I think about just sighing that air and keeping my my chops relaxed, it's not really impacting my lips. I'm playing pretty high at this point, but it doesn't feel like I'm playing high. And if I continue doing that, just hitting the next partial each time. So that series of notes is F in the staff, G above the staff, D over high C, and then G over high C. But when I'm doing that, my face is probably turning a little bit red because I'm using a lot of air. It doesn't feel like I'm, you know, pushing the trumpet through the back of my skull, you know, with using a lot of pressure. So from the very beginning, I'm trying to just get my air moving. And I think that using the lead pipe is a really good way of just kind of reminding our body the way it should feel to just kind of release air into it. And then the reason that that series of notes comes out is because the harmonic series on the lead pipe is very different than if I put the trumpet in. The lead.
Yeah, I stole that from you. Probably I started doing that like a month or two ago with some of my students, and it really just helped them open up their sound. We didn't really dive into the next partial up too much. But just fundamentally opening up their sound, it was huge.
Yeah, well, and I think that thinking of the trumpet, because there are all kinds of different ways to approach playing the trumpet, and they all have their different merits. And you know, there are people that do things one way that sound as good as you can sound, and there are people that do things another way that sound as good as you can sound. For me, thinking of it more as just blowing and using the resistance that's in the tubes to help create the sound makes it a whole lot easier than thinking of buzzing. I do mouthpiece buzzing for certain things, but for me, thinking of it as a blowing instrument where I'm blowing against the resistance, like this is another thing that I like to do conceptually. So I'm just going to blow into the mouthpiece and then slowly add the trumpet, and you can see what happens. Okay, which is really cool. So, because a lot of the times what we're taught when we start is we start with buzzing. And if you can do that, that's really good because it takes, honestly, a lot more strength because there's less resistance. But if I add that sound, I'll do the same thing buzzing now. That's a really good way to overblow and get kind of a crummy sound. So for me, I think about working with the resistance that's in the trumpet so that I don't have to work so hard. I let the trumpet kind of help me make the notes.
That makes sense. Yep.
But I like that you use the two different words too, between like, you know, relaxing and blowing versus like having that firm sort of diaphragm that you're talking about, right? Because you never want to pinch or have that tension. So I like that you lead with just blow, take it easy, right? But there's an element of that back pressure that just comes on the trumpet's lead pipe.
Well, exactly. And I think that, yeah, there's, because some people will say, you know, that you're not supposed to have any tension at all in your body, which is, you know,
hard to do.
We can have. Yeah, exactly. And so I think of everything, you know, from here up, you want to be relaxed, right? You want your shoulders to be relaxed. Your throat should be nice and relaxed and open to let the air out. Because if you're playing trumpet and you see this, I don't know how you can see that, but when my veins start coming out, right, we call that glottal tension. That creates a really pinched sound. Or even if I just talk with my shoulders up, it totally changes the resonance of my voice. So I want to have as much relaxed up there as possible to get that fullness. But if I'm playing my upper register, right, I don't want to have the pressure coming back and mashing my lips down into my teeth. If anything, I want to have it in these muscles that are down here, right? If I'm playing that really high note, right, you can come up and punch me as hard as you wanted in my stomach, and it's not going to hurt because those muscles are flexed. And even now, right, I can breathe and talk and all this stuff and have this be relaxed, but those muscles down there are still flexed, ready to play that note. Right? And then I can release. So having control over those types of things is really important.
Well, and I also want to mention real quick, just because hopefully all of our band students are watching these. So this is really helpful for our trumpet players, but it's also, you know, relevant to most other instruments to play with relaxation, and with the brass instruments to just think about blowing. You know, you don't. I mean, I'm a buzzer. I like to stress that, but you're absolutely right that, you know, when you blow and do the mouthpiece, where you're bringing the instrument to the mouthpiece and like that, it creates, or, you know, it's just helpful for all of our brass players to think about. So all y'all that are hopefully watching at this point, this is relevant for all of us, but trumpet players especially. So
the more ways that we can describe how to do something, the better, because each kid's different. So
right, and that's really important. And I think that a big part of the way that I try and teach is, you know, finding the way that makes sense to each person. Because another part, especially with brass instruments, because brass instruments are very, very physical. Talking kind of going back to the original question of like what I do to warm up or anything like that, I think it's really important that as brass players we approach playing our instruments like it's working out, right? Because it's so much is dependent on how our body physically is working and not as much on, you know, the valves and stuff that we press. So approaching it, you know, however you approach your instrument, just approaching it with a lot of consistency every single day, and especially for young students, approaching it the exact same way every day. We want to do the same things every day to build that consistency, so that when we go to play music, we don't have to think about how to make the trumpet behave. We can just think about playing music. So going back kind of to that question, you know, I do, so I start my day off with those lead pipe things, and then I'll usually do some sort of a flow study, which is just like a really simple pattern that I can just move down in half steps that just, I'm just trying to connect the notes. So I usually do this one. This comes from a guy named Jim Stamp. I'm not thinking about playing in time. I'm not thinking about playing loud or anything like that. I'm just thinking same thing with the lead pipe, just kind of releasing the air into the horn, kind of sighing the air. And I use that word sighing because if you think about like, so if we all take a sigh right now together, when you sigh, you release air at a constant rate. Like no one sighs like this. Oh man, that would be really weird. So I think about that sigh. And then if I sigh through my embouchure, it's going to take a lot longer because I'm going through a small opening like that. But it's a really good way of just kind of regulating that air. And no matter what I'm doing, whether it's a flow study like that or something that is more rangy, right? When I do that, I'm still just thinking, okay, so I'll do that flow study and I'll move it down by half steps. Until the point where I can do it down the octave.
Nice.
Open pedal C, because part of it for me is that I'm not only trying to warm myself up for whatever playing I'm doing during the day. Sometimes as a professional musician, you know, if I have a hard gig Friday night and a hard gig Saturday night and then a hard church gig Sunday morning, I'm also trying to just try and relax everything and kind of undo some of the tear down that I've done the night before. So stuff like that is really helpful. And then one of the most important things that we can do are just lip slurs. So I have a simple pattern that I do. Sounds like this. Down nice and slow, just still thinking about flowing the air, and I'll move it up a partial. I'll go down all the fingerings, and then I'll move it up, slightly modified. And the majority of what I do every day to kind of tame the trumpet is lip slurs and long tones, because those are all, like when we do those, again, we're trying to, you know, push the air or sigh the air through all of those things. I'm not trying to be really athletic with anything. I want my chops to stay absolutely still. Like when I do that, let's see if I can get the camera up closer. All right. All right. If you turned your sound off, it should just look like I'm playing a whole note. All of that stuff I'm trying to play just with really consistent in my body, really consistent with my air. And so then after that, I have a few other exercises I play. But yeah, those long tones and lip slurs, I think, are the most important things that we can do. They're like doing push-ups for your trumpet muscles, whether they're the muscles in your face or the muscles down here in your abdomen. And by approaching the trumpet like that, I mean, every day, if I have a full day of practice, which right now is pretty much every day, you know, I'll do maybe 1 to 2 hours just of lip slurs and fundamentals, just of doing that kind of stuff. And so what that means is that a lot of what I practice feels really boring. So I'll put on TV and stuff when I'm practicing that stuff, because it's literally, I'm not really using my brain very much to do that. I'm just working out those trumpet muscles and stuff like that. But then when I go to apply it to music, I feel like all those concepts are already there. They're just how I approach playing the trumpet, whether it's playing classical music or playing jazz. And so I can just focus on music and not, man, I hope this note comes out. So I think that aspect of playing brass instruments is really important, that we approach it like it's a physical thing, and approach it just like working out.
Well, of course, I like it too because you're playing very virtuosic for warm-ups, so I don't want my trumpet players to be like, oh, well, I got to try that. No, because he's saying, it backs down to lift slurs, long tones, stuff that we're already used to and do. So, it's cool to see that, and how even just those what seem like simple warm-ups end up being kind of the deal breaker, like, the deal or no deal there.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. And, and before, so for example, there's an exercise that I've done almost every day, again, for like the last 10 years. It comes out of the Arbin sport. And it goes like this. Exactly. So it starts with just slurring between two partials that are next to each other slowly with quarter notes, and then it gets into 16th notes. Okay? So. So when I first started trying to do that stuff, 10 years ago, it was really when I was like a freshman in college, because I got to college and realized all of a sudden, it's like, oh man, I am not as good at the trumpet as I need to be to like hang and being a music major. Mm-hmm. That's when I started really taking flexibility seriously, because I found it hard to even just do the first couple of notes. Trying to just make that happen really smoothly. So I was like, why can't I do that? Why can't I do that? So I started practicing it really methodically every single day. So whether you're at a stage where you're just trying to make this sound easy and feel easy, or whether you can go really fast. Technique is the same. I've been practicing it for a long time, so I can go pretty fast, but it feels the same to me as da. So whatever you're practicing, just embrace, trying to make it feel really easy. And part of that is not moving anything, right? Staying totally still. And then the other part is just being really insistent with your airstream. So,
yeah.
Mr. Blair, I think you got the next question on the list.
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, we're in this weird coronavirus world. And one thing that we're kind of encountering now is, I'm locked up with my family and they don't want to hear me playing trumpet for an hour a day. So do you maybe have tips for ways that they can practice? I know you just kind of did the lead pipe stuff. That's a little quieter, but maybe some ideas in that realm.
Yeah, I mean, that I think is really important to doing that. It is kind of, so I live in a house and there's another family that lives below me, and I feel sorry for them because I have to do so much of this. And, that can be, I think, a roadblock to doing the type of practicing that I'm talking about, because it doesn't sound very fun. Like, it's not very fun to listen to. But anyway, so one of the biggest things that I found helpful is using practice mutes.
Sure.
And you can, so this is an actual mute that's made for practicing. So if this is normal volume, I can put in my practice mute. And that's still me playing normal volume into the practice mute. So if you live in a situation where, your family is working from home, you don't want to annoy your brother or whatever, practicing can be really helpful. Any mutes that you can get your hands on, there's also videos online of how you can turn like household objects into practice mutes.
I did that with a Febreze thing once, made a practice mute.
Right.
That really seemed to create a lot of resistance. It wasn't quite the right mute, but
yeah. Well, and I think that aspect is another thing. A lot of people don't like practice mutes because they create resistance. But I actually think that, kind of going back to that topic that we were talking about before, like using that resistance as your friend, like learning how to not to resist the urge to really like try and blow it out of the end of your bell, kind of using that resistance to help you. So it's not, obviously the ideal situation is that we can practice with the open horn all the time, but in a situation like this, that's important. Another thing that I think is important, both for anyone that's listening and for yourself, is spacing out your practice, because I will be the first to admit that it's really hard to have control and consistency when it's just you and the trumpet, right? Because if I have this trumpet in my hands, I want to go straight to playing jazz. I want to go like full out, just playing classical music, play the stuff that's fun. So
and they already do that. So yeah.
Exactly. So for me, creating like a schedule for yourself, like a daily schedule. So for what I've been trying to do in the quarantine is one of the first things I do when I wake up is I do like my 20-30 minutes of just warm up, fundamentals, all that kind of stuff, make sure everything's working. And then I put the trumpet down and I do something else for a little while. I usually try to have an hour or two break. Then maybe after lunch, I re-warm up, do like an abbreviated version of my warm up, and then maybe I'll play some classical music for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. Then I do something else for a long time, a couple hours, and then I'll come back and do another warm up, and then go into doing some jazz stuff. So spacing that practice out. The phrase that I like is that if you're tired, it's too late, right? You want to rest before you're physically tired, because you can get a whole lot of hours of brass playing into one day if you're smart about it. But if I just sit down and just like play high notes or just, endless jazz choruses or something like that, then I'll be, my chops will be wasted in like 20 minutes. So spacing things out will be good for your listeners' ears as well as your face and stuff like that.
Nice.
So, that's good tip.
Let's dive out of the trumpet world for a second. Now, Eric, this is a really important question, and our students are going to have major problems with you if you don't answer the right way. What is your favorite donut shop in Cincinnati area?
In the Cincinnati area. Oh man. Okay. What is the name of the one in Amelia?
Is it Marcella's?
Yes, Marcella's.
Okay. Actually, I haven't been there yet.
Oh man, best donuts ever. I mean, so I did my student teaching at when it was still Amelia, middle school and high school, and every Friday they would have Marcella's, and it was like it got me through the week. That place is great. Holtman's is really good too. If you're in Dayton, Bill's donuts are pretty unimpeachable. But yeah, Marcella's.
Bethel definitely will go for Marcella's.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
All right, good. Incoming collegiate freshmen at like Xavier, what are some common deficiencies, if there is a common deficiency, that you see coming in with college freshmen?
I think that the things that I will say I appreciate the most when I see it in a freshman is really just having kind of the fundamentals of down. Because, when we're looking for people to come to college and be part of a college program, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for potential. Okay. And the things that denote to potential, there's like fundamental things for any instrument. Like, do you have a good sound? Do you have good time? Like, those two things are the most, for me at least, those are the most important parts of being a musician in any genre of music. Do you have a good sound? Do you have good time? If you've got those two things, then we can work with that. Other things, like, you should have, you should know all of your major scales at the very least, just know those inside and out, because that's like the beginning of any kind of theoretical knowledge, and it's the beginning of any kind of technique. So I guess the deficiencies would be when we have people who come in who don't have a great sound or good time or don't know their scales. The other thing is just kind of having what I would think of as a concept of how to play the instrument, just the sound concepts, so like the type of things that we're talking about right now, like how do I actually make slurs happen on the trumpet? How do I make a good sound? What
that
does it
characteristic
mean to have
tone, maybe.
Yeah, all those kind of things that are just like the fundamental parts of playing your instrument. You want to have kind of a grasp of that and we've talked about a bunch of different approaches to that. So you kind of want to have an idea of what your approach is. And the biggest part of getting any of the things we talked about is taking private lessons with someone who can lead you into the right direction in all of these types
Absolutely.
of things. So
I wonder if you'd talk about attitude with that a little bit too, or like the mindset, right? Music's very collaborative. You don't want to come in, have a big head.
right. Well, and so in I teach at Xavier, which is a smaller college and a smaller music school. So I think that the biggest attitude things that I see are either thinking that you already know everything, coming in and it's like, well, I was the best trumpet player at my high school, so that's a pretty big deal. Like when you get to college, you'll be around people from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, and it's just totally different. So whenever you enter any kind of learning situation, whether it's college or even just a new class or anything at your school, you want to just come in and say, okay, I'm going to take everything that I can out of this. And the same thing, I feel really lucky because all of the students that I have in my ensemble at Xavier, they're just there to have fun, and they're really supportive of each other, which is like the biggest things. I would much rather have someone who is really supportive and positive in their attitude than someone who can, play the snot out of the trumpet but is kind of a jerk. So always come in with an open mind to any kind of educational situation, no matter where you think you're at. Another thing that I didn't mention is I feel like this needs to be said in this day and age, like everyone should always be listening to music, right? You should have a favorite band if you're a young person, even if you're just in high school or middle school, you should have a favorite band, and constantly be listening to music, because I think that because the way that we listen to music now has changed so much. It changed from being, seeing live music to going and getting records, CDs. They used to have these things called CDs, kids, and you put them in a magic machine that made sound. Now you can listen to pretty much any music that's ever been recorded on your phone for free. But at the same time, if I ask a younger student, like, what kind of music do you like to listen to? They're like, what? Like, what do you mean? So,
I remember. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, if you're gonna be a music major, you should love music. You should
Truly.
you should listen to a lot of music. And when we talk about having a good feel or having good time or having good ideas or any of those things, like the only way to get those is through listening to a lot of music. So listen to music.
I know there's some of those old like Facebook threads that you would probably be aware of that you're growing up and you're not really going out to gigs, but then you're suddenly good enough to have gigs and you're like, oh, nobody's coming out to my gigs.
Right.
But like I remember in college, a lot of us would go out and go see the live music and see what it's like being a professional in this city and supporting the scene. And it seems like some of that has gone away too.
Yeah, well, and social media, it's amazing that it enables things like what we're doing right now. Like you can have a conversation from the comfort of your own kitchen. In my case, this is my kitchen. But yeah, just going out and being a part of the community, whether it's, if you're in, I'm mainly a jazz musician, I'm part of the jazz community, and so I know everybody in it. Or if you're into classical music, then going to see the symphony and trying to rub elbows with, everyone there. And it's frustrating, when you hear people who are like that, who are not really part of the community, but then are angry that the community isn't embracing them or something like that, Or there's been instances where there'll be like some hotshot player at CCM or something, and they won't be working at all. But it's like, how can I call you to sub for me on a gig if you've never like met me and you've never been like, hey, here's my number, let me know if you need someone, So that networking part is really important if you're trying to be like a professional gigging musician.
Absolutely. How about let's take a small break for a tune, man? Let's hear something.
Yeah.
All right, you want to hear a tune? Okay, so let me pull up my iPad. Especially in this quarantine time, so I'm going to use this app. It's called iReal Pro, which is basically a band that lives in my phone or my iPad or whatever.
Yeah.
I'll play one of my favorite tunes for you. This one is called It's You or No One. And hopefully you'll be able to hear this little backing track. So, oops. All right, here we go. This tune is fast. There we go. Thank you.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been nice. I had to take a little bit of a break when this quarantine started because I got a little too excited about practicing like 5 hours a day. But I've been getting back into it, and it's been good to have some time to really do some shedding. So,
well, I'll say. I was just gonna say, you're talking about the flow and blowing, and you're playing 100 notes per minute, but I like that I can still hear the linearity of your airstream.
Well, and that's really the only way to that you can make that happen. No matter what you're doing. So, doing a lot of that type of stuff, the type of jazz that I'm into is, often line based, driven by eighth notes and stuff like that. But if you have a player like Clifford Brown, who would tongue almost every note, my teacher would say that you can slur without tonguing, but you can't tongue without slurring. So even if I'm doing, some more classical stuff that's more articulated. Even when I'm doing all the articulated stuff, I still have to be, my air has to be going all the way through all those lines, and it has to be totally connected. So that learning how to make your air do that. I've got a whole lot of pithy trumpet sayings because I've watched, most of the trumpet videos on YouTube, but there's a guy named Al Vizzuti who's ridiculous, one of the best trumpet players in the world.
He's awesome.
Who says that everything we do is just one complete blow of the trumpet. So whether I'm doing this, or something like that. No matter what I'm doing, it's just, it should always feel kind of the same behind the horn. So learning how to control that is, I think, one of the most important things you can do.
That's awesome. So we probably have time for just a couple more. I can't imagine how many little 5th grade dudes are still sitting there watching.
I got probably like two trumpet players, 3 maybe, who are like, oh yeah.
Hey, 5th graders, if you're still sitting there, thank you. You're going to get bonus points for that.
Jermaine, if you're still sitting there, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more content. I'm kidding. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's see here. How about favorite thing about being a professional trumpet player, and then also favorite thing about teaching at a university?
Oh, man. Well, I think that one of my favorite things about being just a professional musician is going back to that community type of thing. It's really cool that when I go out to see live music because I love to do that. That's why I, wanted to be a musician. I just love jazz. When I go out to see music, no matter where I go in town, I'm pretty much guaranteed that I'm going to know everybody who's playing. And if they see me, they're going to wave. And after, on the break, they're going to come up and talk to me, and I get to feel like a rock star. If I have the horn with me, they might ask me to sit in. Even in a city like Cincinnati that has a pretty big music scene for a city of its size, there's a really tight-knit sense in the community. And, it's the same for you guys. If you go out, you can be part of that community. So I love that aspect of it. And then in terms of, just being a professional musician, I get to do all kinds of different styles. That's cool. And just having, feeling like I have a way to express myself feels really good. So I think that no matter what we do, it's important to have discipline in our lives in some way. And I don't have a ton of discipline when it comes to running like Mr. Lechliter or watching what I eat and all that kind of stuff, all that stuff. But I feel like I do have discipline in the way that I approach the trumpet, which I think is just really important. And then I think that all of us just should have some way to express ourselves, because no matter what kind of work we go into, there's more to life than work, right? And that goes for musicians too. It can be easy to get wrapped up in just anything that we're doing and kind of forget all those other things. So having discipline and way to express yourself, I think, is massively important for any of us. And then going back to, let's see, my favorite things about teaching in college, it's probably the students that I get to work with. I have at Xavier, again, we don't have a huge music department, so the vast majority of the people in my band are not music majors. They're just there to play jazz and have fun, which I actually really like, because, we're all kind of experiencing jazz in different ways, but it really shows me how meaningful the study of music can be to anybody who's studying any profession, and everybody there is really positive and they're just fun to work with. So, yeah.
I wish I had the discipline for practicing that you do. I did in college when there was also a grade attached to it.
Yeah. Well,
I practice, but if I practiced with the discipline that you have, man, it would make such an incredible difference in my playing.
Well, I have to say that does not come naturally to me. I'm very much a, like, if I just want to just like go, and my mind moves 100 miles a minute. I just want to like try stuff out. But because of the lips, the cold sore things that I get, it's really forced me to approach the trumpet from a really, really disciplined perspective. Because sometimes, if I'm like, oh, I'm good, I don't have to do all these lip slurs and stuff. The trumpet, in its complete wisdom, always finds a way to humble me and make me sound like a sixth grader again. That is just kind of something that's been forced on me. But I will say that without that going on, I probably would not be as good as I am now, because it really has forced me to approach it with more discipline. And, from my point of view, brass instruments especially require that kind of discipline. Like, I used to live with Josh Klein, who's one of the best saxophonists in the area. And, it was so frustrating, because he would just put the mouthpiece on his horn, and then he could just like play jazz just for hours, just from the first note. He's a compulsive practicer, so he'd just be playing jazz all day long, and I'd just be like, oh, why does he get to do that? And then I have to go, do we, you, but every instrument is different. It has its own challenges.
Let's see, Mr. Blair, I'll toss it back to you if you see any other questions that are on the list that you want.
Well, sure. I don't know how much time we have, but I'm just going to hit this last question, because you already kind of mentioned it a little bit about your jazz musicians that you have in your band. But what advice do you have for someone that plays for fun, but not really as a future career choice? Should they approach their playing any differently? What kind of goals should they set for themselves, maybe?
Well, I think that that all of our goals as musicians should just be to get better, and still enjoy it.
Certainly.
I know a ton of people who went to school for music and now are doing something else that's totally different, but they still have music in their lives. And the same is true in the inverse, where you can go to school for physics or math or, you know, sports management or whatever you want to say, and still have music be a part of your life. And there's been instances of famous jazz musicians who were doctors or insurance salesmen or anything like that. So whenever
Charles
you're
Evans.
practicing, exactly,
Yeah.
or chemistry for Alexander Borden. But you know, no matter what you're doing, your goal should always just be to get better. You know, whatever that means for you. Like when I practice, even though I'm a trumpet player and trumpet players are by nature extremely competitive, you know, I'm not practicing to be better than anybody else. I'm always just practicing to be better than I am today. So approaching practice like that, and then yeah, always be looking for opportunities to just play music and have that sense of community, whether it's in college or if you once you graduate from college and you're still playing music, you know, join a community band or just like start a band up with your friends and all that kind of stuff. Just like find ways to still have music in your life, because I think it's a really vital part of just being a person. Is having
Absolutely.
music.
Agreed.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. I think that's a great point to end on. So
Perfect.
this was the inaugural edition of Tiger Tunes Talk. How's that, Mr. Blair?
I was thinking band talk. That's pretty close. But
I like
nice.
that. You guys are
Tiger-
Tiger
Tiger.
Kings.
I would say
Oh, yeah. What's up, all you cats and kittens out there?
Yeah.
Tiger Talk kind of sounds like it's a football pregame show. If it's
It
just
does.
Tiger
It
Talk.
does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. She'd have a grill with some you know, beanie weenies on it back there.
Yeah.
A couple burgers. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, Mr. Eric Lechliter, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Happy practicing, everybody.
Yep. Everybody stay
course.
safe out there.
That's right.
Yep,
Stay
you all
safe.
too.
Wash those hands.
All right.
Thank you.